you who maybe haven't gotten to know me yet, my name is Angela Jones, and we are going to be talking about weeds, pests, and disease. So we got a lot of things sometimes that we have to battle in the garden, and this is going at it from that point of view of soil microbiology. So if you haven't gotten to hear me talk about this before, I studied under Dr. Elaine Ingham, she was a university professor for soil microbiology at the University of Oregon for about, I think 30 years, and then after realizing that so much of the research she wanted to do was not allowed to be funded, she started what's called the Soil Food Web School. So that's where we'll actually look at some of the information she shared later on today. But in this presentation, which now you have on your phones, we have some things linked in there too. So if you want to learn more about all of these topics today, we're going to scratch a lot of surfaces that you can dig a lot deeper in. Now, that Dr. Elaine Ingham said this quote, "The key to healthy plants is healthy soil. And the key to healthy soil is the microbes." And so sometimes when people are like, oh, what's something that anyone can do to improve their soil? I say, well, find really good compost or make really good compost and then apply that to your plants and then get that ground covered with living plants. So we talked a little bit in the past about some key takeaways in our previous 3 classes. Those key takeaways in the past were keep the ground covered, diversity leads to resilience, and when unsure, plant more plants. Now today, we're taking all of those things and we're pulling it back and saying, look at the garden as an overall system. Now, you guys, I've given you a lot of little like name drops of things you could look at. Another little name drop I want to give you is Rodale Institute. This is a book I brought along. This is I got this at a rummage sale, but it still is like one of my favorite books. It's a Rodale Institute, the Organic Gardener's Handbook to Insect and Disease Control. And I put a lot of information in here from this book, but it's this idea of looking at the garden as an overall system versus saying, oh, I have dandelions, I'm gonna kill those dandelions, and thinking that that's just gonna solve all your problems. Like, no, it doesn't solve the problem, and maybe it actually created other problems that you didn't think about because you're not looking at it together as a system. So today, as we're going through, we're gonna go through these different topics of what is a weed, how to deal with weeds, preventative measures, why do diseases and pests attack plants, and then learning that pest life cycle, learning how to monitor plant health. I give a little example of one life cycle in there, but it's nice in books like this where I can go through and say, I want to be looking at a certain specific thing like root rot and understand different things I can go through. So know that there are great things on the internet as well that we're going to go through that sometimes we're scratching a lot of surfaces that you can really learn a lot more about. So, but looking at the garden as an overall system, we've seen this picture before, and one of the really key features I want to look at on this picture today is the bird. We're looking at all these higher level predators. I don't know if you guys saw it recently. Every year, the Mall of America, guess what they use for their insect control and their pest and disease management there? Do you guys have any guesses? Birds. They actually use ladybugs. I'm sorry, I totally baited you. but it's one of those things, though, that it's interesting to see all these different dynamics. So just recently, they put out a video of like all these different volunteers coming in, throwing down buckets of ladybugs all over. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh. But it's that idea of we have a mouse down on the right. We got all these little bugs and worms, and they say arthropods. That's just another word for a bug, a spider or something. But then all of that creating this diversity of microscopic little bugs that we can't see. So that's all the stuff that maybe you can't pronounce or you don't know about, like the protozoa or, the microarthropods, which is just like a micro spider or a micro bug. So don't worry if it's a big word that you don't know, and just realize that it's all so connected. That idea of we have more bacteria on us and in us than we do human cells. And so we have to really realize that when our food is being grown, we are working with this big environment to make it the most not only beneficial for us, but nutritious and delicious. Because guaranteed, when you have nutrient density, that is what makes your food taste so good. And that's why we're wired to enjoy tasty food. because all of our ancestry has been, hey, if this tastes good, it's gonna be good for me. And that's why the garden tomato tastes so much better than the grocery store tomato. Now, from here, we could do a whole nother 4 workshop series just on compost and just on this ecosystem, understanding soil science stuff. But from here, what we're gonna go into is just talking about those preventative measures, which, ooh, okay, see, this is what I was afraid of. There we go. We are gonna go to your phones now and take a look at that. And what I am gonna do, I'm glad we did that QR code thing because I was so afraid of this. I'm sorry, you guys.
I lost mine.
Oh, yeah, there we go. I wish I could cast this. Is there a way I could cast this? All right, are you guys able to get to the same slide as me? Yeah. So you're gonna have to hit that next button. Like here, I'm gonna go to full screen with it. And then slide over for it. Sorry, you guys. I am so sorry about this. Yes. Oh, thank you, Audrey. So everyone has it on their phones now for the most part. Now we're going on to this because it just died. Hey, you can't get it?
I did that. Thank you so much. I tried switching the screen and it left me.
You give your camera.
See this line? She's gonna go through this. She's right there. Healthy soil.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you guys. Thank you. Maria's gonna see if she can give some CPR to my laptop. Ugh, terrible. I'm sorry, you guys. Okay, so anyway, are we all at the same slide now? Are we all at this preventative measures slide?
Which one is that? How far in?
This is the 6th slide. 6 out of 25. Now you really are gonna know when we're done.
There's a little line on the bottom.
Yeah, that little line at the bottom is only like less than a quarter of the way there.
Right, but it's the 6
Yeah, 6 out of 25.
counts slides for you.
Yeah. All right, so we're talking about preventative measures, and some of the things that are really big preventative measures for weeds and pests and disease are things we've already talked about. So giving them the right conditions, so proper site selection and proper plant selection. So studying each site before you decide what to plant there, and closely matching natural preferences. These are things that are gonna make it so it's less of an uphill battle. You know, instead of saying, I want to grow a tomato plant in the shade and in the wind, maybe you say, where's the sunniest spot with the least wind? And that's where I'm going to grow my tomato plant. And that's just kind of simplifying it, but it's that idea of let's make it as easy as possible for us to cultivate this. And now, cultivating healthy soil. We're going to talk about this in the next few slides about what is the difference between healthy soil and poor soil, because so often we can try to start with all the best intentions in the right spot, but if we haven't cultivated that soil to really be beautiful and alive, we can just be, again, dealing with lots of weeds, pests, and disease. Now we're gonna go to that next slide, so we're doing a little swipe over on the phone. If you guys wanna give me a thumbs up, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so we have talked about this one too a little bit, that idea of a living ground cover, because so often, if there is bare ground, if there is nothing there, guess what Mother Nature wants to do? Cover it with weeds. Cover it with the first things that are gonna come up in this big word called succession. And that idea is, what is its successor? What's gonna come next in it? And first in succession is bare ground. So we're gonna go, actually, this slide has a ton of links on it. So careful where you click on it, do a swipe, because there are tons of little links to like Earthside Nursery, McKay Nursery, a bunch of different native plant nurseries that are gonna maybe help you figure out what a low growing perennial ground cover is. There's another little list I have on the side here. This is a beautiful time of year actually to go and look around at people's yards and see these violets blooming everywhere. So purple violets just started to come up and bloom, and that is not only a native perennial low growing ground cover, it's also our state flower, so win-win. Now, The next slide also talks about native short growing ground covers, and we talked about these, a couple of my favorites, the wild strawberry, pussy toe, prairie smoke, wild ginger, and then the violets. Now, but why does keeping the ground covered with these low growing perennials really change your soil health? Well, this is, again, I can't help but give you a spoiler alert. So we already talked about this a little bit in our other classes, is this idea of when you have the ground covered in grass, you are getting very little runoff. That water is going down instead of to the side. And that water, when it does go down, that's a clear jar down there below. And if I have just some mulch or some straw covering it, that's gonna also make an immense difference. So even mulching or having wood chips is gonna make a massive difference. There's very little runoff going onto those jars at the end of that experiment. Whereas if I go to the bare ground one, it's almost all running off, and it's running off with minerals, nutrients, microbes, humus, all the organic matter, all the things that we need for our plant to grow. So keeping that ground covered with woody material, it's not only helping that rainwater run off, and then ideally with that grass, it's also helping what's called soil structure. So at the bottom right on this picture, there's these 5 different columns showing how the further along in succession, the more kind of like fluffy that soil becomes. I talked about it in the past where there's a farmer, Gabe Brown, and how soil structure is so often reflected off of the roots in the ground. And those roots are almost like scaffolding. When you look at the scaffolding outside a construction building, how that's building this structure to go vertical up and down very easily. Same with our roots. It's making it so that that water can go up and down very easily. And especially for water to get to your plant that you need, or microbes to get to where you need, it all connects with that ground covering. Now, the other top right of this picture shows you start off with annual weeds. You start off with our dandelions, all our things, and then the further along in succession we go to perennial weeds and grasses, to shrubs, to then having like our bushes, and then having these big forests, and then having pine trees and big forests. And the further along in that succession we get, the more fungi we have. So I have done a lot of soil analysis where I look at people's soil under the microscope and see what's alive in it. For most of us, we are dealing with a lot of weeds because we don't have the fungi, because we just have the bacteria, these little tiny dots versus these strands and these wefts. They call them hyphae, so it's like a string, and it really does look like roots in the ground, fungi. So that's where when we till and slice and dice, we need to replace that with roots in the ground versus slicing and dicing and tilling up to fluff it, but then never getting something else to create that structure. So know that if you are tilling, you gotta replace it with something else to create that structure, because that fungi just got sliced up that we're gonna help you kill that off. Now, next slide, we're gonna go back to that concept. So don't worry if you guys didn't get that. Now, at any point, I got kind of caught away with all this technology stuff, but if at any point you guys have questions on this, because that's a complicated topic that people with like their masters in different types of soil science will still be studying the rest of their lives. So know that that's a big concept that most farmers don't even really get to, because you're battling weeds the whole time, not thinking about what is causing these weeds. There's the effect, what is the cause? So really working with nature is something that like the Rodale Institute, and for the past, we're gonna go into this even further, so I'm gonna go back to it, but it's that idea of working with nature's design versus constantly looking at a man-made solution of a chemical or an herbicide or a fungicide or a pesticide, because anything ending in "-icide" means what? To kill. Exactly. It's that idea of if I'm killing off this one dandelion, this one other thing, I might be killing off a whole lot of beneficials that could have built up and inhibited it in the future. But we're going to talk about what weeds are now. So what would you consider a weed? Just name them out. It's okay. Probably no wrong answers here.
Creeping Charlie.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone else think of big ones? No? Thistles. I know we have a whole list. I have on the side over there, if you want a little refresher, there is like 5 pages of invasive species that are either regulated or being actively worked against. And yeah, all of the things you guys are listing are on there. So we got a lot of things we're fighting, really, we do. And these invasives, some people would say it's any plant that's growing in an undesired location. That's kind of like the conventional term for it. Some soil scientists, like Dr. Elaine Ingham, they put it as a plant that has a short life cycle, matures rapidly, and can go to seed very quickly. Now, these are also plants that are going to invest very little energy into their root system. So you might have a dandelion with a taproot going down, but in general, like our crabgrass, our creeping Charlie, all these different plants are going to have very short roots and tons of above ground and tons of seed to spread all over above ground. So weeds and bare ground also will equal to, I put some other soil science stuff on here because I'll be honest, I've used these slides before for other things. So don't worry if you don't understand some of these, like talking about alkaline soils and pH parts of things, because basically the idea is you're wanting to cover it with mulch, cover it with roots, because that's going to lead to more fungi, and more fungi are helping lead to better soil structure, and that's going to lead to more or less weeds. And it also helps lead to a more neutral, slightly acidic pH versus the neutral, slightly alkaline pH. So bacteria, the things that weeds love, those create what's called alkaline glues, or this really fancy word called exudates, which if I sneeze, my snot, that's my exudate. So it's something that they just exude, you know. Not that I exude snot, but it's just that idea of sometimes pH is something that most conventional farmers get really invested in and trying to balance, and it makes sense because it helps with regulations and things. But when farmers go towards these regenerative, biological side of things, they look more and more at that biology because they know it's going to dictate whatever that pH, whatever that chemistry is. And that's where, for me, I worked in chemistry, soil science for a long time, looking at these things and seeing, why is it every year we have to do the same solution to the same problem? And then realizing it's because we aren't fixing the biology. You can keep putting on the right chemistry, but unless you have the things that are alive in that system, that chemistry, whatever nitrogen, phosphorus, things that might solve it for a short term are not your long-term solution. They're gonna wash away or degrade or erode, because you saw how fast things can wash off in that bare soil too, and you're not building up the biology to hold it in there anyways. Now, we're gonna go to this next slide here, talking about cultivating healthy soil. So we know that what poor soil is a little bit. So fertile, well-drained, and teeming with communities of diverse microbes, those types of communities are going to help sharply increase a plant's chance at a healthy, productive life. Now, that basically is saying that any tiny rocks, anything that's your minerals in your soil, as well as the organic matter, your air, your water, plus those microbes and other animals, that's what's equaling a healthy soil. And kind of like that slide before, I say it again, more organic matter, that is going to equal more life forms with soil that are more lively. And then that's going to equal more competition between the beneficial and benign and those capable of doing harm. So it's that idea of, instead of killing off everything or killing off the thing that I think is going to harm and then it kills off some other beneficials, I'm going to increase the beneficials to inhibit and compete with and maybe even consume those predators. We're going to go into this a lot more, but that's just the beginning idea of that idea of inhibit, compete, and consume. Go ahead, Joan.
So once you do the soil, it's all good soil, you have your garden planted, can you do the same exact sequence of how you planted next year?
You know,
can you put the same plants in the same spot?
So we've talked a little bit about crop rotation when we talked about plant selection, and that idea of right away every year having to rotate isn't absolutely, but this is where there's two conflicting arguments within soil science. One is that you always will have to rotate, and in a sense that is true. The other is that if you build up a diversity, that diversity, you don't need to necessarily rotate as much because you have so much other things going on that it's, again, that resilience of, I have something else always competing with it. So it doesn't matter if my tomatoes are there, if I have marigolds and other cabbage and kohlrabi and all these other things growing nearby or next to. So there's two different ideas with it. That idea of rotate or work in succession. Work with my acidic things all being together. So my blueberries and any other of my later in succession. So vines and bushes. So our pumpkins, our squash, our cucumbers, those are slightly later in succession. Now we are gonna talk a little bit about using these beneficials to inhibit, compete, and consume. And what is these beneficials? Well, using lots of mulch, woody materials, and that is what's helping feed your fungi. And then also using the roots of plants to feed your fungi. Ideally, we can also add in some rich compost. The hard part is, we've talked about this a little bit as well, that idea of what is good compost is not always equal. So it's hard to find a good supplier in general, looking for organic or looking for something that's a worm casting or a mushroom base is gonna make it a little bit easier to qualify as a good compost versus sometimes you'll get like different horse manures or things that have maybe higher nitrogen and could even burn your plant because they're not fully composted, not fully decomposed. And then a high diversity of seeds. So this is where getting those roots in the ground of a diverse amount of different plants is gonna help build that diversity in the soil and build that resilience in your plants. This also is gonna help beat the compaction, which I put a big old paragraph in there about what compaction is. But it's that idea of if your water can't go down, if it goes off to the side, that's compaction. If I can't put my trowel in the ground easily or my shovel in the ground easily, that's compaction. They say if I have a piece of rebar and I just try to poke a hole and I can't poke it down, that's over 100 pounds per square inch. That's like over 100 PSI. So you think your root of your plant is gonna go through that? No fat chance. Yeah, and that's where raised beds sometimes are often like the first solution for some people, or doing a massive diverse seed mix to open up that ground where it's like, 10 different or a bunch of different diverse of seeds that are gonna open up that are like tap rooting or daikon radish, turnips, all these things that are gonna get in and open up. But tap roots are one of the only things that people can get to open up some of those tight compaction areas. The other things people will do is I have on here how to deal with weeds. You can do your last till ever. And that's where you break up all that lawn, you slice and dice, or you use maybe a little bit less invasive one where you use the broad fork or a pitchfork and just kind of almost aerate, open up that lawn. But immediately afterwards, you apply that rich compost, you apply those plants that you want to grow, those diverse seeds, and that is helping infiltrate that ground with all those beneficials that you're going to be needing. So some people, how many of you guys usually would till your lawn every year? Or till your garden, not your lawn, I'm sorry. Yeah, so it's common and it's conventional and it's not necessarily like you're ruining everything. It's that you're taking things back though in that succession a little bit and making it maybe slightly harder for you to get forward. So I know my dad used to do tilling every year. That's how I grew up. And then when he started doing the leaf, so taking all the leaves, taking his lawnmower, mulching over that, and then taking that leaf mulch that he just, mowed the lawn over all the leaves of and covering his garden bed with it. Well, then guess what? The next year he didn't have to worry about opening it up as much because it didn't get pounded on by every single rain, hail, snow thing that we got that winter. It got that surface layer of protection and that moisture retention too. So often if you start to build up that covering, you don't need to till up as much because you're building that soil structure. But this is, again, your life, your vegetables, your tomatoes, your garden, you're gonna do what you're gonna do. But I think trying out some of these concepts, even in one part of your garden, might be a fun experiment. So like even for farmers, I rarely will ever tell a farmer, oh, I think you should just go no-till. I'll say, this is something to consider on one piece of land at one time and see how it goes and then go from there. So putting all your eggs in one basket is still that same idea of diversity, not diversity, not leading to resilience. We're gonna go to the next slide here, and this is actually an example that I did with a farmer. So I know we're not dealing with acres. I know we're not dealing with a monoculture, but I just wanted to show you this of just applying compost changed his weed pressure completely. So we had been working for a long time on building really rich compost, and the one paddock was his conventional method, right? A couple weeks after, or actually literally a week after sowing. And so you can see there's some tiny little green lines on there on your picture, and then there's weeds almost about to cover them already. And then on the right side, he did the exact same planting, exact same everything, but then he did what I would have talked about maybe a little bit, the compost extract, where it's that taking the compost, extracting it. What we're doing is with like a paint strainer bag in a 5-gallon bucket. What he's doing is like on a big, drum to spray it out. But it's that idea of taking compost and water, applying that water that's filled with all that compost, and then those microbes are doing the work to inhibit, compete, and consume those all those things that are gonna make those weed seeds germinate. So it's amazing how the microbiology, the things that are alive below the surface that we can't even see, are affecting what grows. Now, when a flower blooms, we don't fix you can't fix the bloom. You fix the environment, not the flower. And I think this is even true for us in our health, where sometimes we think about fixing something in our life and we think about us being the problem and not the environment. So, go ahead.
So we shouldn't be going by what the seed packets say, 6 inches apart, 12 inches apart, and then...
That's a great question. So usually your first time I will always go a little closer than what the seed packets say. That's my personal preference, because I'd rather have to cut back a little bit and prune back a little bit than have bare ground with weeds that I'm combating all the time. That's my personal preference.
Not 12 inches apart or 2 feet apart.
And maybe at 20% closer. So like if it's saying 12 inches apart, maybe I'll go to 10 or maybe even to 8 inches apart. So I'm not saying throw out the whole playbook, but that idea of keeping things closer together or making it so that there's just enough light to get to your plant, and then the rest of it is keeping the ground covered versus keeping them so far apart that you have so much bare ground in between. So it's definitely a balance. With any piece of this soil science stuff, it is that Goldilocks principle of not too much, not too little. You know, I said it before where it's like, if I drink too much water, I drown. If I drink too little water, I dehydrate and die. Balance with all of it. Now, we're gonna talk a little bit more just about this encouraging diversity, rotating crops, and avoiding monocultures. So all of these can kind of be incorporated together, where if I have a ton of diversity, maybe I don't need to rotate as much. So maybe in your lawns too, this means planting a mix of lawn seeds where it includes different things versus just saying I want one type of grass seed. And again, that leading to diversity and resilience. Companion planting, I know we went over that a ton already. And same with that idea of using the marigolds or strong smelling herbs in your vegetable garden. And birds, they eat many destructive pests and are among the most efficient insect predators. So that's where having a space, planting trees, shrubs, places to provide, shelter for them, and even maybe having a bird bath are all gonna help increase your pest, pressure with the predator. So knowing that it's maybe not the worst thing in the world if you have a rogue sunflower growing from your birdseed, because you're building off all of these pests as well. So I talked a little bit before about ladybugs. Another couple top ones I think of are lacewings. Those are used a lot as well to consume and parasitize your destructive pests. So in this book, as well as on like the UW-Madison Extension website, there are so many mind-boggling amounts of resources as to ways that you can use a biological control. Now, the next slide, I just kind of included in here, it says handle with care. The next slide, I'm just talking about that idea of when you're grabbing your plants, especially as your baby plants here in spring, any bruised, torn, damaged leaves and stems can cause unnecessary stress, weaken the plant, and are an open invitation to pests and disease. So just handling them with care like you would, a little baby anything. So touching the plants gently, don't tug to harvest or prune, and always using a sharp knife or pruning shears for clean cuts. And then also trying not to work around your plants when they're wet, because it's same idea of if I don't want to brush my hair when it's really wet because it's easier to damage. Same with if I'm working with my plants, it's just going to be that a little bit easier to damage when it's wet. But this is not a hard and fast rule. Are there times where I'm outside and when it's raining and I'm just doing what I need to do? Absolutely. So don't feel like any of these things that I'm telling you, you're like, oh, I can't tug this plant. I got to go grab my shears across the yard. Don't worry, okay? So handling with care though. And then what I was saying before about ladybugs and lacewings, choosing a control, those are called, those like using an insect or some other thing that's going to inhibit and compete is usually considered a biological control. And that's using these, maybe it's using a high quality compost to inoculate with those beneficial microbes, or it could be taking some of those biological pests that you know are going to be a predator to it. There's also things like organic sprays and dust, and that's usually what you will see in most stores for like dealing with insects, pests, weeds, and disease. And with all of those, I say use with caution and know that you have to be on it as far as what's going on. You have to be learning to look at your plants. We're gonna go into that a little further, but the reason I say that is because so often these sprays and these dusts, they coat the plant and the parts inhibiting the problem spores. So the things that are at the beginning of the life cycle of that disease or that pest. So that means early treatment is the key to getting it to actually be a successful treatment. And using any of these with caution. So I included some fungicides like sulfur, lime sulfur, copper-based compounds like copper sulfate. All these things can easily go out of balance and kill off the whole plant. It's kind of like a chemotherapy to your plant, where it's like if you could kill off too much of it and kill off all your beneficials, and then it doesn't have enough good to live. Now, you can also do things like making your own. So like vinegar sprays, baking soda sprays, garlic sprays. I'll be including a link, I think, on there to some little DIY recipe stuff for that. But even at Walmart, I noticed recently they started including vinegar in their pest and disease section. So it's just one of those things. Even big box stores are realizing that, hey, maybe we need to offer another solution besides killing off all these things, and something that's just, you know, a slightly safer option for you versus I'm not able to stand over there with bare feet. I might be killing off bees. I had a lady before, she couldn't come to the workshop today because she had to work, but she has bees, and to kill off squash bugs and things, she needed something that wasn't going to also kill off her bees or hurt her bees. So, and realizing that we all have that same thing, whether we own the bees or not, there's always going to be all these other ecosystems happening within that one thing that I'm trying to get rid of. Now, why do diseases and pests attack plants? I'm going to maybe not play this video for you right now, but I would highly, highly, highly recommend. There's a tiny little play button on here. If I hit play, it's going to show you talking about all these things, the soil food web, that idea of having all these little microbes covering the roots of your plant to defend them. So it's a nice little like 3-minute video, but I would definitely recommend going back to it. That's slide 10. So slide 10, if you can, go back to and watch that video. I think, or wait, did I just click somewhere? I did. That's a lie. It's not slide 10. 18. Thank you. You guys get gold stars. I appreciate it. Ugh, what would I do without you? Okay, now I'm, I think, at the right spot. Okay, dealing with diseases and pests. So I said before, there's a whole bunch of resources on the UW Extension and like Rodale Institute. Almost every insect disease thing that we're dealing with has a life cycle phases that you can try at different points doing different methods. So checking the life cycle of a pest you can pretty much do just by a Google search in general, but for the most part there's 4 phases in life cycles that are good to reduce pest populations. So where are their eggs laid? When do the eggs hatch? Where do the larval stages hang out? And when do the larvae molt into adults? So basically all these like transition life moments in that pest is another opportunity for you to go in and kill it off. I know that sounds so ruthless, but they are too. And then if you can, ideally you're doing not only one measure, because usually when I'm looking up these different things, which we'll go through an example of in a second, I don't want to just fix it in one spot. I'm going to try to attack it in all 4 of those phases. Now, why are pests and diseases attracted to stressed plants? That's actually the main thing of that video, is talking about how when you have that bare ground, you're making that plant a little bit more stressed out because it doesn't have those microbes down below to help defend it. So when it's a stressed out plant, that's kind of like its immune system. It's easy prey for that. That's where, like for us too, if I just eat PB&Js and don't get enough sunlight, guess what? I might be more easily able to get sick. And it's not that I'm in a different environment than the person next to me. It's that I am not having the right microbial populations to like inhibit and make it so that I'm hard to kill off. I have enough good to inhibit and compete with those bad. I didn't explain that really well, I'm sorry, but yeah. So are these pests really attracted to a stressed plant, or is it the sick, unhealthy plants that allow the diseases and pests to access? So sick plants are not covered. There's no coverage. Whereas our microbiome, that's the same for a plant too. They have these bacteria and all these things covering them. Now, monitoring your plant's health when a disease or an insect is seen on the plants, take a close look at the field conditions. Why is this disease here? And then you can be taking a look, is it a mite or is it a thrip? What's nice is like Google Lens. That's an easy way to be able to like scan and see, hey, what is this telling me? And then from there you could go on like Wisconsin Gardener or different Facebook groups, which there's so many online resources now to verify and validate things versus just using the Google Lens or just using some plant app. So it's nice to have some real life people who are sometimes master gardeners who are able to give you some IDs on these things. And chances are give you what's worked for them too. So what's maybe not in the UW extension but has worked well. But we're gonna go through now the life cycle of one type of pest, a thrip, and just know that this is true for so many different ones. So going through their larval stage, and then all the way to the point where they're an actual adult, and knowing that, okay, I'm just reading this. Knowing that these eggs are protected inside the leaf tissue. So you have to coat this with beneficial compost or using something that's going to attach to because those bacteria and fungi are going to attach to the nymphs and leave the plant tissue. I'm not going to go through and read exactly which one, but basically I go through like 4 different times that you're going to go and either apply beneficial compost or use those biologicals. Like I have Beauveria, which is a milky spore, and in another, it's a local species of fungi that'll attach itself to the insect, grow into it, and decompose it. And so Beauveria is actually used for quite a few different things. So that's where you're using not only all these other environmental things, but I hear you. Thank you, Maria. Yes, you're the best. But it's that idea of now I'm getting it in all these different stages. And the best thing you can do is honestly getting that biology in the soil so that when that plant is healthy, it's not subject to that insect and pathogen again in the future. So sometimes you have the same issue every year, be it a sponge moth or some other invasive thing. So continuously building up that microbial community is why I'm so passionate about it, because it's the long-term solution versus constantly going in with some sort of aside and killing it off, which you can do as a short-term something to kind of be that CPR, but knowing that long-term, we gotta always think about this as a big picture overall system. The next slide, I just included a couple of invasives. So you might see like common teasel along the side of highways a lot. That's a really invasive, not common one. You'll see wild parsnip over at Brantford Park. There's a big old sign for it even. That's something that really itches and can give you rashes and things. So good to look out for. And that you can see it kind of can look like Queen's Anne's lace sometimes or some other things. So being mindful of just what's out there because it's easy to misidentify things too. So learning, knowledge is power with all of it. Now, there is this last little piece I wanted to include here is the same thing as what we talked about before. Why do we always have the same issues? Why are we always going back to, I have not enough food or not enough harvest from it, I should say, and I'm dealing with diseases and pests and weeds? Well, we have actually been dealing with this for maybe longer than we even realize. So I have a little quote here from Plato, who he was alive from 427 BC to 348 BC. He said, when they went to a new place, there was no diseases or pests or weeds, but over the years, there remains only bones due to the soil being compacted. And now I feel that this is actually, I've been shown that this is the same with the land of the Americas, the land of milk and honey. And over the history, every civilization has degraded their soils. And Egyptians only tilled once a year to prepare their seed bed by hand. Australia invented the first mechanical plow in, I think it was like 1907, destroying soils faster and faster now every year since then. So it's interesting that the more we open up and take up and tear out our soils, the more we see health issues, the more we see our nutrient value and the nutrient density in our foods go down, and so many other effects throughout. Now, I could go through so many little pieces of this, so I wanted to leave a good amount of time for us to just have some Q&A, some opportunity to work through it. So on the last slide here, I included some homework of just planning your diversity and low understory things, be it maybe deep mulching just this year, and then working from now to see where can I source some violets, where can I source some other, different low growing, or maybe I do a cover crop this winter type things. And then consider what pests you've dealt with in the past, and maybe doing some research on their life cycles, and looking through it, because I don't know it all. I'm always learning new things about pests. I'm definitely learning from even the people that I garden with, because there's so many times where you might have one thing to answer it, I might have another thing to answer it, and if we both do it, that might give it even better chance. But then the last little piece of homework is the most important one. I don't know if you guys read it. It says, enjoy the process of nurturing nature. And it's that idea of we are here to be fruitful and multiply, was what in the Bible, one of the first commands we were given. And I think that comes true to these microbial populations and these soil life and the life of the birds and the mice and everything else that are around in our earth. So I hope you had a happy Earth Day the other day too, but that's kind of my way of saying we gotta take care of this land as an overall thing versus constantly looking at one pest, one weed, one disease. But do you guys have questions?
Yes,
Yes, let's hear it.
2. Can you buy a bag of fungi starter? And the other one is those stinking earwigs that eat all my baby plants.
Yeah, so the thing with fungi, I might include it with the email, is a list of starting materials. And that's that idea of a list of all the carbon, high carbon foods, high nitrogen foods, and then that balance of slightly higher nitrogen than carbon. So like the green, the brown, and the high nitrogen. Because basically for your fungal foods are all your high carbon ones. So that's where wood chips covering things, leaf mold, any plant that has gone through its whole life cycle is now a high carbon food. So like that tree sprout right now, like all these little maple leaves that are coming up and sprouting, those are now a high nitrogen because they're putting all from that seed, all that energy into that. Whereas once they go through their whole life, then in the middle of their life cycle, they're more of a green. They're 30-1, they're like a middle, that's like what we are. But then as they die off, as their nutrients goes back into the soil or whatever, or if the leaves come down, those leaves now are carbon because all that nitrogen has gone back into the tree. So that's where even our toilet paper rolls or our papers we can use for a carbon source. And I have other things in there too, like straw, wood ash. The thing is, again, diversity in sizes too, because like, if I just used a ton of sawdust or a ton of wood ash, that water might eventually just get compacted in a clump and not be able to go through. Whereas if I have a diversity of sizes in there, it's gonna help with building up that microbial population of fungi.
So you can actually use your shredder paper?
Mm-hmm. Especially, just make sure that it's not glossy, coated plastic type stuff. And for the most part, almost all of our inks are either like soy-based or vegetable-based, so you don't have to worry. In the past, they used to be maybe more heavy metals in them.
So what if you used paper and then wood chips to hold it down?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that's kind of taking, like when in our first class, when we talked about the lasagna method, it's that idea of layering different types of materials to A, increase that diversity, but B, give you, you know, all these options for what you can use versus feeling like, oh, I gotta go find wood chip, I always gotta find this certain thing, but yeah, it's nice to know that you can use what you got. But if you guys wanted to too, I know sometimes like deer or groundhogs or rabbits or some of these bigger, maybe not necessarily calling a pest is not nice, but they certainly can be ruthless. I've been experimenting with it a little bit, and I've talked to some of the reps for these. It's called plant skid and pest repellent, basically companies that they use like garlic oil and orange oils and like basically trying to use these kind of more odorous but organic or natural based substances, and seem to have pretty high success and have had good reviews. So I personally haven't tested them out because I just found out about them over this past off season, but I have their information on the back wall back there. Yeah.
What about molds?
Hawk. No, I'm just but really, it is that idea of like there are like farmers and stuff who will use hawk perches and eagle perches and owl perches just to be able, and same with like bat houses, continuously building up spots for higher level predators and building up shrub, tree, bush areas, especially if you have a good amount of land. But otherwise, it is such a battle. It is such a battle. The thing is, especially that soil health thing, the microbial population part of things, it's interesting. Rich, beautiful fungal dominant compost can help make it so they're deterred, because there's all these other things creating this structure around it that they don't want to dig through these, you know, really porous, root, fibrous with fungi soils. Whereas, yeah, like there's been some experiments done, especially in like California. There's a company called Catalyst Bioamendments, and they will work on kind of bigger scales where they take a ton of compost, put it on like almost desert landscapes, and take areas where it was moles, voles, all sorts of like compaction, and turn it into like a tropical oasis. And that's where it's cool to see the power of microbes, because you think these are these things you can't even see without a microscope, but yet they're changing places that could have had a fire and have had fires all around them, and then they're a little oasis protected from it. Or vice versa, they've had a drought, but they still have this water retention because they have all these spots for water to retain and infiltrate. And it's amazing when we start to see how nature's design, if we work with it, is going to provide us not only what we need, but an abundance, and with way more ease than fighting in it to get our straight lines of our monoculture or whatever. But it's all to be said with balance, because especially when we've been doing this for 100 years one way, to say we gotta change it all and go towards this permaculture or multi-cropping, it can be that's like rewriting the clock or making the alphabet go in a different direction. It's totally trying to kind of change how things look. So I know if you guys have questions come up throughout the season, biologicallyrich.com, that is my website. I have been always updating it. So education tab under biologicallyrich.com, that is where I have things like finding soil amendments, like learning about what are perennial edibles or what are some low growing plants, and where I have a lot of the same links that I put in our website stuff. So another kind of cool piece under that education tab is if you have kids or grandkids, or if you want to learn more, it's a ton of different either curriculum ideas that are free, be it just like free coloring things for your kiddo, or scavenger hunt rainbow thing where you go and try to find the rainbow outside with the kids. But all just ways to maybe learn more about soil science and get engaged with the garden. And then also some higher level ones too. So if you wanted to ever learn more about soil science or get into maybe permaculture, other levels of gardening, we're never going to be done learning. So we're never going to know what's all alive below our feet, but we're learning new things every day, and I'm excited to keep learning with you guys. So thank you. If you've made it to all 4 of these classes, I also just need to say a huge thank you for coming to all 4, because that's a lot of your time out of your day, and I appreciate you making the time to come. And I will be sending a feedback email, not only like our replay email, but a feedback link. And if you guys can respond to that, that would be amazing, because it'll help give me a foundation as to what the needs are and where we can meet them. So yeah, that'll be coming to you guys within the next week here, so. Yeah.
Can I just ask one, but how do you get rid of dandelions?
So, well.
They're coming up all over there.
Well, and what they're really saying is that there's not enough other things growing. If you just have grass, like one type of grass growing somewhere, dandelions are gonna come back every year because there's nothing else to inhibit them. Whereas if I have a bunch of different like clovers or different other things growing in there, then that diversity is gonna be helping. That said, usually dandelions, because I have dandelions too, they're gonna, that nitrogen and that taprooting, A, is saying that you have compaction, and B, it's saying that chances are you just need some more diversity in your soil. So this is where, when we've lived in a convention of grasses for our lawns for how long, to have that dandelion is gonna always be that little stubborn nail in our heel, because it's saying, we need some diversity, you need some diversity. Yeah, I think you need some diversity. And it's like, okay, well, what if I don't want you? Well, you need something, so. Yeah, there's a company, I didn't put them out over there, but it's called like Flawn, like flower plus lawn, and their whole thing is low growing flowering grasses. So like different types of like clover, creeping thyme, creeping phlox, and it's nice because you can get like whole bags of garden, like you would your lawn seed, but with different other things in there. So you don't have to think as much about where do I get all these different things. So yeah, there is that biologicallyrich.com. I'm hoping to continue to make an education resource for you. That said, that feedback survey, I really hope you put it up, you come back with everything. You can fill it up with pages, that's okay, because I'd rather hear everything you want to know and go from there. So hopefully we do have more gardening classes in the future. But yes, today is our last one. Actually, I would like to do a plant swap, give and take thing, like the week after Memorial Day, or the week of and after Memorial Day, like the last week of May. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah? That was a lot of, I felt like we could get a little more excited. Do you guys want that? Yes? I want free tomatoes, darn it, come on! Okay, good, because I know a lot of people either have too much or too little. So like there are people like me who will grow 10 times too many tomatoes because they don't know, what's gonna happen. And then, what do you do with 10 times too many tomatoes? You can't plant them that closely, Yeah. Well, I can't grow everything. I only have so much lawn. So we'll share the love, I guess, is what I'm saying. And same with if you have, like, say you have rhubarb or things that are just going out of control. It's gonna, I think, basically be a week with a drop sheet out in front of the YMCA that you can bring a plant, give and take, whatever you want. So I'll be putting signs out for that, but I have to plug it now. So in a month from now.
Yes.
Bring your fruits of your labor. Beautiful. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.